Welcome into this here program. I may have squealed a little bit. My name is Arky Shea. This is Basketball by Association. That is Joel C. Cortez. Joel, do your best squeal. Come on.
Welcome to puberty, Arky Shea. Glad you could join us.
I don't know why, and maybe it's just the extreme fat it's in my body still. Why every now and then, like, I will hit another, I keep finding testicles that drop, like it's weird.
Let's just call it the enthusiasm effect. We'll not go any further than that.
Oh,
I don't need to hear about your extra balls and
why not?
It's nonsense. Because I hear about that like 12 hours a day when we're not on the air. I don't need to hear that.
They say Kyrie's one of the best ball handlers. I'd like to give him a run for his money.
Oh my goodness! All right.
Yeah. Anyway,
this here podcast is episode 77. And oddly enough, Arky Shea, when we get into like the 60s and 70 numbers, not a lot of people have worn said numbers. But 77, of course, is the number 7 twice, which some people consider a bit lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And by my really great math skills, which have been shown many times on this show, a whopping total of 16 players in NBA history have worn the number 77. Now,
really?
Of course,
that feels high. That feels kind of high to me.
Including, dating all the way back again into like the 1940s and the very beginning of the league, which isn't entirely surprising because we've seen a lot of the really oddball numbers go back to that time period.
Yeah.
But of course, the most famous one right now, 77, would be Luka Doncic.
Yeah.
We're not going to name the episode after him. Luka gets plenty of laurels and praise, and we've done a couple of big name episodes already. And to me, the next most famous guy on this list has a tie into what we got last week, which episode 76, the 7'6" Sean Bradley, who played for the 76ers. At the very same time that giant was roaming the league, there was another giant who was wearing the number 77, and it was symbolic for him as well because he was 7'7". That, of course, would be George Mirasan. But Arky Shea, we're not going to name the episode after George Mirasan. As much as I love my giant.
No Luka, no George Mirasan. Who's left on this list?
No, because this is an opportunity, Knicks fans, for me to dig the knife in a way that I can't pass up. I gotta straight up dig the knife, then twist it, then flip it over and twist it again. Like, Arky Shea, can you recall somebody in not too distant Knicks history who wore number 77 and became the epitome, the microcosm, the poster boy for everything that was wrong with the Knicks during that era?
Yes. I don't want to say it. Are you going to make me say it?
Do the honors.
Andrea Bargnani.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Andrea Bargnani episode. 77 was worn by Andrea with the New York Knicks only from 2014 to 2015, which honestly, it seems like ages and ages ago, but it's not that long ago.
Yeah.
It's really not. And it just seems like it's so much longer. I did a double take when I looked at those numbers. And of course, that goes back to the whopping massive trade, the fraudulent heist that Masai Ujiri from the Raptors pulled on the Knicks with multiple draft picks going their way in order to get Bargnani off their books to New York. One of those most lopsided trades of all time. And Bargnani was already fighting bust, the bust moniker when he was in Toronto. He actually had a few more effective seasons than people give him credit for. It wasn't like full-blown bust. It was just not what you think you're going to get in a number 1 pick. And by the time he got to the Knicks, though, we were bust city.
Yeah, well, again, the number 1 overall pick. So, like, if he gives you a few effective seasons, that's a bust. Okay, like if you get a few effective seasons out of the best player perceived in that class. I don't even remember who was in that draft. That was because he was already like, by the time he got to New York, he was like, what, 6, 7, 8 years in the league or something, right? Like he had been Is that right?
He did.
So he was like 2000,
6, 7 years. Yeah, 7
Okay.
seasons with the Raptors. He came into the league at 21. Let's go back and look at that draft in 2006-07.
Oh, it's 06 draft. So that is oh man, I don't even remember who was.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So let's go back.
Is that like the Rondo draft?
So Bargnani was taken number 1 by the Raptors.
Yeah.
Again, thank you, Basketball Reference. You always save our bacon. LaMarcus Aldridge, number 2.
Oh yeah.
Adam Morrison, the stash by the
Yep.
Charlotte Bobcats, 3. Tyrus Thomas, 4 by Portland. Sheldon Williams by Atlanta at 5.
Okay.
Minnesota took Brandon Roy at 6 and then traded Brandon Roy to the Blazers and got Randy Foye back instead.
Yeah, that was fun.
Rudy Gay was in that draft at 8.
Oh, UConn's own, yeah.
There's a lot of busts in there, but also some guys who did good things. JJ Redick in that draft. Tapalosha had a reasonable career. So did
That's
Bonnie
a decent
Brewer.
draft. I mean, it's not the best. I mean, it's not the best, but like.
And you are right that Rondo went 21st to the Phoenix Suns, who got rid of him for basically nothing, to the Boston Celtics. Kyle Lowry went 24th in that draft, and after that it gets real nondescript. But
I'm thinking like there's a handful of guys on that list that are like still playing, man. That's a fairly good.
PJ Tucker, 35th in that draft in the second round, and a guy who I got to see play in high school because he went to Brown Deer High School in Wisconsin, central Wisconsin, in the Milwaukee-Madison area, and we were in the same division as him. Steve Novak, who played at Brown Deer and then went to Marquette and was also a Knicks guy for just a little bit, but kind of hung around the league for 11 seasons as a sharpshooter, and now is the color commentator for the Milwaukee Bucks. So,
like you said, kind of held around. He was around for over a decade. That's
Paul Millsap, 47th in that draft.
That's a pretty okay. So like that's more than just a little decent draft as far as guys who are still playing. Like you're either in and out in like 3 years or 4 years, or like you were in for like it's 15, 16 seasons later. Yeah, you're in, man. That's not the worst draft. I mean, it's not very top heavy, like as far as like,
sure. Yeah, it's role player city, except for LaMarcus Aldridge, really, and then Millsap and Rondo had some all-star seasons in there too, of course.
Yeah, but it's a lot of names and a lot of names that are teams that are contenders, and the guys who put up numbers pretty routinely. So, yeah, okay, that's not that's a better draft than I was expecting when you reminded me that Andrea Bargnani was the number 1 overall pick in that draft.
And to be fair, Bargnani did last 10 seasons in the NBA, which is no small feat. And he did, in 2010-11, average 21 points a game. In 2011-12, he averaged 19 points a game. So there was a couple seasons in there of effective scoring. The problem is the dude never averaged over 6 boards a game and was 7 feet. And he only averaged over a block 3 times, and it was barely. So
he wasn't. He was a 7-foot bust. He was a bust for what the Knicks would have hoped him to got him, but for when Toronto got him, sure. When they grabbed him number 1.
And you got to remember that this is right during Dirk Nowitzki's prime, where he was lighting it up and was, the prototype stretch 4, and everybody was looking for the next guy who could be that. And Bargnani, of course, got that moniker as the next Dirk Nowitzki for a while, and he had some of Nowitzki's, shooting ability, but just not the rest of the game by any means.
He was respectable. But respectable doesn't cut it when you're talking about the number 1 overall pick, right?
And then to be in a blockbuster trade where multiple picks are given for you.
I don't want to. Can we stop talking about that part?
All right, let's get going. I know we got a whole division to talk about here, and it's a doozy. It's a doozy.
We got the Pacific Division to bring up first, but I wanted to bring up a couple of quick things that happened literally moments after we were done recording. Right after recording the Southwest Division last week. And posting it the next day, Shams Charania reported that John Wall of the Houston Rockets, they're apparently both going to mutually work together on moving John Wall elsewhere. John Wall's not leaving as far as or holding out. I should say he's going to be at training camp. He's going to work out with the team. They just have made this decision to sort of find a new home at some point for him. We've sort of talked about him being, the kind of square peg in the round hole for this Houston Rockets team going forward. Thoughts on the news that John Wall and Houston are going to find their way apart at some point?
Only thought I have is that he will find a home. It may require a buyout, but of course they're going to try to trade first. And now it makes the DJ Augustine signing as the backup point guard make tons of sense. We didn't understand why they needed 2 veteran backup point guards last week when you've got so many young guys. And now having DJ around, complete sense. Now, who winds up being the starting point guard there? They've got Kevin Porter Jr. Penciled in on the depth chart over at NBC Sports Edge, formerly Roto World. I don't know if that's actually what he'll wind up playing. Dashin Nix could get some minutes there. Dante Exum, who is a prospect who's been hanging around the league for a while. Make it look. Armani Brooks was originally listed as the point guard. So I think it's going to be very fluid in that backcourt as they figure out who their primary ball handler is going to be and how that fits with number 2 pick Jalen Green. But again, yeah, it's going to be one of those work in progress teams, super messy. But I think on some nights, on those rare nights where the stars align, that team's going to put up a crap ton of points and run somebody who's unsuspecting out of the gym. And it's going to get really fun. It's just not consistently enough, obviously, because of the sheer youth of that team.
I expect a lot of usage. I shouldn't say a lot. A fair amount of usage of that meme from Anchorman where Will Ferrell says, "Well, that escalated quickly."
Yeah,
because there will be a lot of people not suspecting, and maybe a fresh Houston Rockets team, perhaps, to come out and all of a sudden have a 42-point first quarter, and you're like, "Oh, what?" All right, well, we're in this.
Yeah, they may be one of those teams that jumps out to those early leads, and then the fourth quarter tightens up because of youth and wind up squandering a bunch of games that they shouldn't. That's very typical of teams like that. But that's all I got on Wall. He will find a home. Don't be surprised if it's somewhere again after a buyout, like the Clippers, like the Heat. I don't know if it'll be the Lakers. Of course, Lakers fans just want it all. But it'll be somebody else maybe in that second tier where it's a good fit for him. It won't be too many minutes, but he's going to be adding to an embarrassment of riches for somebody.
One other quick story I want to get to because there's not enough meat to the bone on this yet, but it's just sort of perception wise about Kyrie Irving since we've last spoken.
There you go with meat on the bone and Kyrie Irving ball handling and just all the euphemisms in the world here.
You're welcome. Nick Wright tweeted that there are a handful of Kyrie trades that are potentially making sense for the Nets. Kyrie's agents have made it known that if this would have happened, Kyrie would simply retire from the NBA. Kyrie had responded on Twitter and just sort of had, I think, the puppet strings, puppet sort of emoji or something like that. And then Nick Wright went back at him and said, "Hey, your representation is saying this. I mean, I don't know who you're talking to. It's about a puppet or anything, but someone's out there talking." It's also sort of been reported that Kevin Durant doesn't necessarily hate the idea if Kyrie Irving has to sort of leave this team. But he's not necessarily pushing towards it, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Would the Nets be wise to even entertain an offer for Kyrie Irving? Like, does any of this make sense for Brooklyn going into the 2021 season?
No, it does not. It's a bad sign, again, if you're already having, like, if there is a legitimate backroom dealing going on here, backstabbing or guys getting sick of each other. It doesn't surprise us. This was a combustible group to begin with, a mercurial group, whatever adjective you want to use. So no, it doesn't surprise me at all, but you've pushed all your chips into the table for this. Yep. Kyrie Irving not on the Nets unless, again, it's a hand-picked place where he's like, "Ooh, I really want to go play with that guy," or that big three or big four, whoever, whatever's happening. It's such a limited number of destinations, and the number of teams out there who would be that type of destination and who have a top tier talent or two that they're willing to give up. It's just so limited. So you're rolling the dice on not getting the right return because this would be a huge risk for the other team if there is any truth to that story that he would retire. And none of us would put that past Kyrie Irving. Like, I fully believe that Kyrie Irving will walk away from the game long before he has to. I think we're looking at a Barry Sanders type of situation here where there'll just be that day that he's done. And when he's done, that's it. Now, whether he tries to make a comeback 2 years later, 3 years later, like some of these guys do, I could also completely see that as well. Just because he very much seems to operate on his whims and emotions and wherever that's leading him in that day. But if you're the Nets, you've pushed the chips in on this. You ride it out. You ride it out until that contract is done, or until Kyrie comes to you and says, hey, I want out and here's where I'd like to go. And then you work to make that happen and you unload him for whatever you get back. If somebody's willing to take him and you can get assets, you do that. But I don't think the Nets as the initiator for that makes any sense at this point.
Yeah, and we can move on to the Pacific Division after this. It's just, if you're the Nets, what could you possibly get back for him for this run right now that would be suitable for a trade?
Paul George. If you could bait the Clippers into something there, and again, the Clippers have been, it seems like, a little iffy back and forth with George, but if there was the ability to do that, and if Kyrie had any interest in playing with Kawhi, any interest in being in LA, then you're a rival to the Lakers. Like, you could maybe sell somebody on that. Miami is one of those teams that's always in the mix on this stuff, but I don't think Kyrie fits in with the no nonsense mindset that they got going these days. Like, I don't think, unless Pat Riley's ego really is as big as ever, and he's going, yeah, we can bring him in and he's going to fit and he's going to march to the beat of our drum, but that's such a huge risk. I don't even see the Heat attempting that. That's all I got. I mean, legitimately, I don't think Philly is a big enough pull for Kyrie. I don't think any other destination, some of these other like quasi contenders, Denver, Golden State, I don't think they have that pull for him. And if he's just doesn't want to go into a situation where he's not a legit contender, and it's like he's the man there and he's with friends and it's completely tailored to exactly what he wants. The dude has a ring. He's made a bunch of money. It's clear that while he loves basketball, it's not, at the very least, not the only thing he's passionate about. And there are days that it's not the top thing for him. There's nothing keeping him in the league at that point if it's not a situation that truly excites him. And I don't think the Nets can manufacture that type of situation.
No, it would be interesting to have Kyrie go to another city if he went to LA, and to be the second team of basketball in that city or area, and still be second fiddle to someone else that's right across the street or in the same building, but not for long. As you saw the photos out of the new Clippers building that'll be up in 2025, because Steve Ballmer says, take $4 billion of my own money and just build a house. Go build a house for him. So. All right, let's get to the Pacific Division, Mr. Joel C. Cordes. If you remember last year, your NBA Western Conference champions came from this division. That is the Phoenix Suns. They won that thing by 4 games last year. They did pretty good. Also had a pretty good offseason when you talk about the players that they kept on their team primarily, including the big one, Joel, Chris Paul going ahead and re-signing with the Phoenix Suns for the next couple of seasons. Joel, does this make them the team to beat in their division?
No. This is
even keeping Cam Jordan, even keeping Paul George, Chris Paul, not the one to make them the favorite to win in your eyes.
No. This is a prize fight of a division. I cannot remember the last time there were 4 teams. Every once in a while, it's happened in the Southwest Division where you get the Rockets, the Spurs, the Mavs, and then the Grizzlies that were all really, really good. But this is insanity in that you've got the Western Conference champs, and they legit could finish 4th in their own division this year. Now, granted, I think they'd still make the playoffs, but Phoenix...
4 teams played into last year, right?
Oh my goodness!
Everybody not named Sacramento got an invite,
and that's what we're looking at again. Phoenix had a good offseason. You lose Dario Saric, who we saw how valuable he was when he went down. That changed things in the NBA Finals quite a bit. However, the Suns bring in JaVale McGee, who still is serviceable. I think Jalen Smith has to be ready to play at power forward this year to back up Jay Crowder. Cameron Johnson has to take a big leap forward. He was a guy who showed really nice flashes last year. They bring in Landry Shamet, who I think has been misused in a couple of spots as a sniper. So I love that he's the backup to Devin Booker. You got another specialist on the roster. Cameron Payne, who really won himself a home in Phoenix the same way that Bobby Portis did in Milwaukee. Cam Payne, now that he's got a little stability and he's got a little money, he's got to prove it because, you know, Chris Paul, we know his age. We know that Devin Booker can play some point guard, but Payne was such a nice spark plug for them and may wind up playing more minutes than last year. Although I do like the fact that Elfrid Payton got put on this roster. I know he struggled in New York, but as a pure distributing point guard, he's got some weapons on this team, and he's got a pace, I think, that works a little better than what he had with the Knicks, where he could give them some effective minutes at times when they get up tempo.
I was going to mention him real quick, just because that's the very little expertise I have on Elfrid Payton. Was watching him a lot this last year. He didn't fit the New York style with Tom Thibodeau. I 100% agree with you. I think in this type of offense, which again isn't, you know, the old Phoenix Suns, right? It's not quite that, but it is more.
It's opportunistically fast. They run when they got it.
Fair. That's absolutely fair to say. That he is a much better fit in Phoenix than he is in New York. So the numbers for him, I expect to look better when we look at these statistics throughout the season than I expect them to be in New York, because he wasn't a fit. He was a bad fit in New York in this offense, and I think that was a reason why the Knicks weren't, necessarily sprinting to the offer sheets to sort of write him up for something.
No, I agree with that. So much of this season depends on the leap that the young guys do or don't make, whether they're content by where they were at last year and thinking that just coming back, just running it back will be good enough. It flat out will not be. Last year was a weird year for so many reasons that we talked about a ton on this show. And Phoenix was opportunistic all year. They were very good all year. They kind of held on to that second seed, it seemed like, for most of the season.
Yeah, we talked about throughout the year. We didn't think that they'd have the stomach to hold on based on all that youth, but they did. I mean, they absolutely did.
And they showed some rocks during the playoffs, right? I mean, they got into some sticky series, and they got themselves out of it. They really played like veterans, but Devin Booker's got to have another leap, I think, especially defensively, and he also can't have those games where he just struggles, because that was apparent during the playoffs.
Do you think he still has enough ceiling there? Do you think that we're still there's still another big leap to be made for Devin?
I do. I think it comes from consistency. I think it comes from eliminating or very much minimizing those bad games and big situations that did occur enough to be a little bit of a trend for him. He typically would bounce back, but I think
fewer of those.
We're looking at a perennial all-star caliber talent.
Yeah.
At this point, really entering his prime. There's nothing he can't do offensively. Defensively, he can be better. So there's room to grow there. And then just being able to pick your spots, pace yourself, and find ways to score the nights that it's not going for you with the jumper, which is rare, but it happens. You know, Mikal Bridges has got to become a legit two-way player every night. Not necessarily your second best player, anything like that, but again, that ancillary piece that is just Johnny on the spot in both on both ends, and he certainly has the tools to be able to do that. Deandre Ayton, I think it's about being able to run offense through him when Devin Booker isn't on the floor. Ayton has shown that ability. He's got, again, all of the skills to do that, but it just wasn't always there every night. There were nights that he would also kind of fade into the background because it was somebody else's turn. And I don't think you rely on Chris Paul to be your second best guy on certain nights anymore. I think you got to assume that Chris Paul will be your fourth best player on any night. And you got to go in with that mindset. And if he proves to be better than that on certain evenings, great, you're going to be ahead. but it's got to be in Booker and Bridges and Ayton's minds. And then you got the other young guys coming up behind them on the bench. Like, it's got to be in their minds that this is their team now, and it is their job to absolutely carry the torch and learn those lessons that Chris Paul really helped kind of instill last year.
Well, that was the whole reason Chris Paul was brought in, right? You had a bunch of really young, talented guys. They looked destined to make that leap to get in not only into the playoffs, but maybe even start competing in the playoffs. They were just, everyone talked about them being a few years away. They just kept getting these draft picks were hitting for them. Like, they were playing really, really well. And they were just, it felt like a little bit of leadership and some know-how and some limiting of mistakes that a veteran who's leading the team at point could help for you. And you bring in a guy like Chris Paul, and you saw how immediate dividends that played. So I think that's a good observation, that now that you've sort of seen him lead you by example, you got to take some of those lessons you learned, and you got to take this team by the horns, because the old man led you there. You just got to keep drinking from the fountain.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. And so much of this depends on Phoenix's youth and maturity. That's going to be in their favor, because they're theoretically less likely to have the injury issues that some of the older, but maybe a little bit more talented teams in their division have. So if they, again, can just win the games you're supposed to be winning, win enough of those games in the title fight matchups that you got within the division and elsewhere, and continue to stay healthy, like, they can be very opportunistic again. And, it's not inconceivable that they could win the division, but you would need some things to happen and teams falling down in front of you. It's also not inconceivable that if the two LA teams and the Warriors, who we'll get to in a bit here, if all of them stay healthy and play to their potential, it is not impossible that Phoenix has a very solid year and still finishes fourth. That's how good this division is.
Well, let's go to the team that actually finished second in that division. It's the Los Angeles Clippers. They've already been alluded to in the let's get rid of Kyrie for Paul George trade that Mr. Joel C. Cortez is proposing, if the Nets do want so. Talk to me about the Clippers and their chances to sort of, again, we're talking about the toughest division in all of basketball right now. Talk to me about what you think their chances are to contend for and to win this division, considering they were runner-ups a year ago.
2 words determine all of it. Kawhi Leonard, right? We're getting reports about where the knee is at, and nobody really knows, and surgery happened, but there's no timetable for return. And we know that if a return does happen this season, it's going to be load management city all over again. And this is what the Clippers signed up for when they, did so much to try to get him there. Like, this
100%. It's going to be. I'm sure he's going to tell you some things. He's a very quiet individual, keeps to himself, private. But I mean, we were surprised, I think, how quickly he re-signed with the Clippers. So obviously there's going to be some cooperation there. But as far as us knowing anything about how comfortable we will be and when that timetable for him to return, because that injury happened right before right during the playoffs. During the playoffs last season. We don't know quite when he's going to come back. It could be, well, who knows for Kawhi Leonard? He's a superstar, Superman. But yeah, there's a lot, just like you said, we just don't know. We just don't know when the guy's going to come back and how good he will be. We presume pretty good because the surgery's gotten so good.
It's a veteran team. It's well coached. Most of the key pieces were there last year. We'll get to some of the new guys in a minute. So even if Kawhi Leonard is hurt, if everybody stays healthy and some of these new guys are able to step back and step up and really have bounce back years, they're still a fringe title contender without Kawhi Leonard. They're
really?
Definitely not. Yeah, they're not the favorites by any means. But if all things remain equal and you don't have bounce back seasons or breakthrough seasons from some of the new guys in a minute here, then this could be that team that's sitting in fourth very easily and still have been, a tough out on most nights and did the right things overall. And their numbers probably look okay. But so I think there's a lot of variable for them, just like there is with the Suns. But Kawhi Leonard returns and gives you 35 games and you're not load managing him by the playoffs, that changes everything, right? This becomes a legit title contender because, once again, they got a lot of nice depth. They got a bunch of different weapons. Paul George, it is one of his strengths that he does a little bit of everything. But you need Reggie Jackson to play the way that he did at his best last season, where he won himself the starting job after having almost, this is not hyperbole, almost played his way out of the NBA and was coming in on a minimum deal and just a let's see what this guy has deal, because he's not old. And he played phenomenally for them and fit. So he's got to do that. Eric Bledsoe is another guy who, man, the fall from where he was the last time he was with the Clippers, or even, you know, what was perceived of him when he was with the Phoenix Suns after leaving LA. It's been a long, slow erosion for Eric Bledsoe. But again, as a strong, athletic guard who does a little bit of everything, there's some opportunity for him to really remind people what he can do. I think so much of it with him comes down to confidence. His shooting confidence has been shot no pun intended, the last couple of years. And so there's a lot of room for improvement. Terence Mann was another guy that blew up at the end of the season for them, you know, as a rookie, and gave them some huge minutes during the playoffs. What are you going to get out of him? What are you going to get out of former high lottery pick Justice Winslow, who, you know, has bounced around the league trying to rehab from injuries, but there was a lot that was expected of him, and he could be a very interesting piece where you've got Marcus Morris getting a little bit older, you've got Nick Batum definitely getting a lot older, and you don't know how much tread is left on either of the tires there, especially with Batum. Harry Giles is another, you know, relatively high draft pick that the Kings took, or he should have been a high draft pick, I should say, but then all the knee injuries bumped him down. So you're putting him in the mix there. You still got Ivica Zubats, and I believe Serge Ibaka is slated to come back, although he was dealing with injury issues too. Luke Kennard gave them good minutes. So I love the depth that this team has. I love the veterans that they have. We know that the mix was kind of combustible a couple seasons ago, but last year it really seemed like it coalesced into a familiarity with everybody and that they were more or less on the same page. And that's a credit to Coach Tyronn Lue. So they've got all the tools, but it comes down to Kawhi's health and what happens with these multiple X factors that they've kind of collected onto that second unit.
Yeah, Reggie Jackson, by the way, it's 31. Going back to you're saying he's not old, and it's true. He's only been in the league for, I shouldn't say only, but he's been in the league for a decade. So, I struggle with the ceiling for this team, and I think it's, you know, it's not just Kawhi dependent. It's the gelling of all of this depth. Like, it's a good problem to have. If you're going to have a problem, it's a good problem to have. A problem that is we have too many guys that could be pretty good for us and that could fit in some of these roles. But I feel like for me, out of this division, this is the great unknown team, which is I think it's very possible that this team gets out to a super cold start. And by the time Kawhi does get back, assuming he does be able to get back, that there's a significant enough hill for them to go up and climb in a division that's not super easy to sort of get back through. You're going to have a lot of teams, Joel, winning a lot of games out of this division. So it's going to be difficult. I think they'll still make the playoffs, and I just don't know, you know, if they're going to be fighting for a home court spot or be battling around the 6th spot or so. But I'm very much a bear on this. I don't want to sell on them, but I'm definitely holding for now as far as how high I think my expectations are for them. So the Lakers finished 3rd in the division, Mr. Cortez. The Lakers were the team that we thought, hey, they're just going to sleepwalk their way into the playoffs and turn it on just like it's so easy to do in the playoffs. And that was not the case, Joel. So the Lakers made 1,000 moves this offseason. They completely revamped their roster, it feels like. Very different team and a very different feel, at least how I perceive it, looking at this roster, and to think that this team is not going to be fighting for the playoff contention. This team will be very tippy top, I think, provided everyone stays pretty healthy, which they couldn't do last year. Joe, would you agree with that assessment? And what do you think of this roster overhaul that happened this offseason?
This is the team with the highest ceiling, if it all comes together. But the track record, the health track record, is not in their favor. The age track record is not in their favor. All of this centers around, no pun intended, Anthony Davis. If Anthony Davis is healthy for the entire season and effective and is able to anchor your defense, because this team is short on defensive specialists. They've got some guys who can hold their own defensively, but they're short on like pure stoppers. And they're going to be asking certain players like Kent Bazemore and Wes Matthews and LeBron and Talen Horton-Tucker to do more on that end than they typically do. They're going to be asking Dwight Howard to turn back the clock and just be defense only. And can those guys do it? Yeah, I think so. Can they do it for 82 games? Can they do it for 7-game series? That's going to be a great unknown. And if you're asking those guys to do it and you don't have Anthony Davis covering over a multitude of defensive sins like he does, if you don't have Anthony Davis behind backing things up, like, this is where things could get ugly. I think they'll still be able to score points well enough, although we saw what happened when Anthony Davis was gone and how they labored offensively, even with LeBron in the mix. And I don't think Russell Westbrook necessarily solves that problem, although he gives you a nice, again, change-up pitch or fastball in the case of Russell Westbrook, gives you a nice fastball when Davis and LeBron are sitting. Carmelo Anthony can give you good, effective minutes yet. Trevor Ariza and DeAndre Jordan maybe don't have a ton, and I'll say the same thing for Wes Matthews. They don't have a ton left in the tank, but they should have enough on this type of team. Kendrick Nunn and Malik Monk are really intriguing because those are a few of the only young guys that are here, but we've seen them play in the league already, and we know that there's something there. And maybe when they're surrounded by such veteran presence that their youth is going to be really amplified in all the right ways. So yeah, I mean, this team absolutely could win an NBA title. Absolutely. They could steamroll through the Western Conference. I don't think it's going to happen.
So you think the potential is there for this group of AARP members to steamroll the conference if they reaches their potential? You don't think it's going to happen?
They can make it to Denny's before 4 p.m. Yeah,
but you don't think it's going to happen. But you think that the potential is there that they could run away and hide with this conference?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the sheer amount of talent and veteran know-how is absolutely there. But there is enough shooting. There is enough of everything except that defensive end. But a crazy thing happens when you get veterans together who are really on the same page and are able to all fall in line. They will defend above their track record typically. And they'll be able to do things that, again, turn back that clock and you go, oh, I haven't seen him defend like that in a long time. I didn't even know he could still do that. But the veteran wiles come out. All the little tricks of the trade come out because of that focus. There's absolutely that potential here. But again, I don't believe that LeBron James and or Anthony Davis will make it through an entire NBA season at this point. My money more is on Anthony Davis again, because I'm not wishing ill. Like, it's just the track record that's there and the workload, even with all of this talent around him, the workload that Davis is going to have to carry, especially on the defensive end. But he still has to be one of the main guys on offense every single night. It is seasons few and far between where he's had that monster workload, which has been almost every year, that he makes it 82 games and is effective. It's always the nagging injuries that keep him out a couple of weeks at a time, and then he comes back, and then it's maybe a good month or two, and then the nagging injuries hit, and does he make it to the playoffs in one piece? Like, I'm just going with the odds here right now. And I know Vegas loves these guys because of course they do. It's the market and everything and the names, but the odds are not in their favor when you look at the injury history of their top guys.
Yeah, the most Anthony's played in a season, 75 games, and he did it. The last time he did it was 2017. So
Westbrook has had his injury bugaboos, although if you lose him again, I don't think it's such a huge deal. I think Westbrook's true value is going to be as a spark plug when the second unit comes onto the floor, of him staying with that group. And then you just let him go at 110 miles an hour and do Russell Westbrook things. And you got something rolling there like that. That'll be kind of fun to see. But I don't think he gives you all that much when he's on the floor with LeBron and Anthony Davis, because Westbrook isn't a floor spacer and the ball's going to flow through those other two guys' hand instead.
His last year in New Orleans, he missed 26 games, missed 20 the year after, and missed 26 games last year. So yeah, a significant amount of time miss in just the last few years due to those nagging little things. Okay, the next team also made the playoffs last year, Mr. Cordes. A very dangerous team, as we've seen many a time. It's the Golden State Warriors. I don't think I need to give a lot of preamble going into Golden State. It kind of falls on a couple of guys being healthy and ready to play, sort of being the spark plug to start this team. But Joel, I know you very much enjoy this Golden State Warriors team and their potential.
We've talked about them for a few weeks on this show and really throughout the off season. So for those of you who've been listening on Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast, and of course you can check out the video version on YouTube, give us that like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you've been following along, thank you if you have. I keep alluding to the fact that I am very high on the Golden State Warriors. In fact, so much so that I'm picking them to win the division. We'll get to the rest. We'll get to the rest of the picks after this. But you're right. This pick will go up in flames if Klay Thompson suffers another, horrific injury. Please, basketball gods out there, don't let that happen to Klay again. Like, give the guy a break now. Let him come back, have a great season. James Wiseman had some injury issues at the end. But I look at the starting five, and you've got that experience. You've got some youth and fresh blood coming in with Wiseman, who we saw really did some fun things there as a guy who can play above the rim. And they didn't always have that. Andrew Wiggins seems like he's found a home and a real comfort zone in knowing who he is as a player, which is a guy who defended a lot better last year than people gave him credit for, and that we saw ever in Minnesota, who played with a lot more motor and purpose. No one's ever questioned Wiggins' ability to make a pretty play, right? To get into that turnaround Kobe jumper, to yam one home on a defender on a putback dunk, or just fly down the lane and just keep rising. And it's like, is he up there yet? And he just kind of keeps going and gets a dunk. Like, no one's ever questioned that. But to be able to put that together into really some winning basketball, even when Steph Curry was out or Draymond was out, it's as complete of a starting five, if intact, as you will find in the NBA. Plus, you got the Steph Curry factor. Plus, if Klay is there, and even if he's not your lead defender anymore, which I would highly doubt is possible given these injuries, but if he's at least a neutral defender and still able to sharpshoot for you, you don't need him to carry the same offensive load like he did back in the day when you've got Wiggins in the mix and you've got a guy in James Wiseman who, yeah, you're not going to run post-ups for Wiseman, although he's kind of capable of that, but you can run pick and pop with him. You're certainly going to run pick and roll and lob plays. You're going to look for him out of secondary and third actions as a cutter. Like, Klay is not going to be overtaxed here. And then the bench there's some sneaky potential here because of the number of guys who have played big minutes now over the last couple injury-riddled seasons and held their own and played above what their draft position was, what their pay grade was, where they've got, they've got more experience than you're going to think. And I'm talking about like Michael Mulder and Jordan Poole, Damian Lee, Kevon Looney, of course, goes back to the title runs that they had. So those are guys who I think at this point are a known commodity for the bench, and they know how to play together. They know to play with the stars. And you've got two guys who have shown flashes in the NBA, are kind of multi-talented players, but very inconsistent. That's Otto Porter, who's younger and has dealt with injury issues. Remember, that's the former number 3 pick from the Washington Wizards a few years ago. Oh. And Nemanja Bjelica, who's a 2-time MVP over in the Euro leagues, came over much later in his career here with Minnesota, did some decent things, and then last year struggled between Sacramento and Miami, but is a guy who can handle the ball a little bit, can shoot the ball a little bit, rebounds, and is a better passer than a lot of people think, and he's big. So you got a stretchy 4 type of guy who has a lot of veteran know-how, is just a little bit weaker on the defensive end at this point. So I like the mix that's there. And yes, this all comes down to health, as we've already talked about the Lakers and the Clippers. Like, I'm not worried about the health of the Suns so much, but definitely for Golden State, there are some huge variables here. Most of it is centered on Klay Thompson. But I think there's a better chance that they can keep all that together than Kawhi magically coming back and giving you more than half of the season with no load management, and a better chance than Anthony Davis suddenly giving you 76 games at MVP level and be an MVP ready by the time the playoffs hit too.
Yeah. I don't have a lot, I guess, to sort of add to Golden State because you hit it so well. I think I think defending this Golden State team night in and night out is kind of akin to, trying to disarm a bomb, right? Like it can be done and you can do it, but you usually have to go you have to be very, very cautious with it. It's very, very fragile. It's very tedious. And still, at any moment, things could just blow up right in your face, and they could go on like a 14-1 run, and you're like, "That happened in 2 minutes." I don't know.
And shout out to Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. This bomb is traveling on a bus that you got to keep going at 55 miles an hour plus or whatever it is. Like
that's the speed they go. Yeah, that I do not disagree with that at all. I mean, we watched it happen time and time again. If fully healthy and raring to go, it's just such a difficult offense. And such a difficult set of players to be able to consistently defend if you're in a 7-game series, right? And throughout the season, they'll have their blowouts and they'll have their off nights where they're, 3 road games in 5 days kind of thing, or 6 days or whatever ends up happening. But there's just so much to defend that it's kind of a miracle they've lost in an NBA final, right? Like the fact that LeBron was able to get over on them. Like one time, and they really shouldn't have. But it's kind of a minor miracle.
It's one of those sports miracles that there's no rhyme or reason to it ultimately.
Yeah, so I find it difficult to sort of see in the same division this team. That's the next team we're about to talk about, the Sacramento Kings, who also participate in the Pacific. So we do have to discuss them for a few minutes before we get our picks and get out of here.
So NBA.com tells us. I mean, that's the only verification that I've seen yet that they play in the same division.
Well, they drafted Davion Mitchell, and a lot of people like Davion Mitchell. I'm one of those guys that watched him play a lot and thought, yeah, he's a really good player. I think that's
at the same position as your starting point guard and franchise cornerstone, De'Aaron Fox.
Okay, so there are problems with the decision, right? I think it was get the best player on the board kind of thing. Yeah. I think it was like 8 or 9 that they had him on the draft. So yeah, you'll have to figure that out and make that work. But you're not bereft of talent. Like, you have a couple of really good basketball players. Davion Mitchell, again, I'm super high on. Tristan Thompson's there now, right? Tristan Thompson's in Sacramento, isn't he?
He is.
Okay. Okay, that's sell me. I mean, what do they win last year? I'm not gonna go back and look. 31. They were 31 and 41, so not the worst team in the league.
No,
no,
they were competent last year. Actually,
yeah, they. It's just after talking about those four powerhouses ahead of them, you do sort of lose a little bit of steam. But can they get to 500 this year? Can they be 41 and 41 this year?
Well, I'll give a typical long-winded answer to that. It used to be that you could sum up a Sacramento season preview in like 4 words and just say Kings are going to King, right? And by drafting Davion Mitchell, again, maybe best player on the board, what have you, but you're drafting him at your position of strength. De'Aaron Fox doesn't play a different position than point guard. Like, that's a classic Kings move. Because now you have set yourself up that if this works, you got to trade one of them. And if this doesn't work, you busted on yet another top 10 pick. And the Kings have had so many of those, whether you want to talk Thomas Robinson, Jimmer Fredette, what have you, like there are just way too many of those picks in recent memory, much less franchise memory. But as you said, they weren't terrible last year. They were watchable for the first time in a long time. And it wasn't just, they're watchable because they have De'Aaron Fox. It was they got themselves into some pretty decent games. And you said you like Davion Mitchell. I run down the starting 5 and go, I like De'Aaron Fox.
I do too.
I like Tyrese Halliburton. I like Buddy Hield.
I like him too.
I still like Harrison Barnes as a role-playing, stretchy type of combo forward. I like Rashawn Holmes. I don't know how much I like them as a starting unit because again,
maybe Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know how much I like them as a starting unit. I don't know outside of Fox. Like, do you have another star there? I don't think you do. Think you have some solid starters. And Halliburton is going to be a very valuable guy, everybody thinks, and I share this opinion, a very valuable guy on some winning teams during his career, but I don't know that we're going to call him a star, and maybe Davion Mitchell is, but so you have 2-star point guards, like that don't work. So the rest of the team, I can't really tell you that I like or dislike them. I don't know how it all fits together. I used to like Marvin Bagley, but that ship has sailed a while ago. Like, it's another one of those Kings rosters where people don't want to go and play there, so you get what you get, and you just try to figure it out as you go. We're at the point where none of us really like Luke Walton as a head coach. Maybe there's some people out there who don't dislike him yet. But just like, what can you say to get excited about this Kings team in the face of the 4 other teams that not only do they have to compete against in the standings, but that they're going to see for like a third of their games this season? They're going to see those 4 teams over and over and over again. And yes, it's entirely possible that the Kings steal like 1 game out of 4 in every one of those series. I don't put it past them. This is not a terrible roster, but that, 1 and 3 each time you play those different teams, like that's not good enough, obviously. And there's too many other good teams in the Western Conference. When you just look at who they're going to have to match up against night in and night out, for me to even think that, they're winning 41 games. Could they win 36, 37? Could they be in play-in territory down the stretch like they were last year? Could they even be in the top 8 for a certain portion of the season? Sure. But I don't think it's any more sustainable than that. I don't know. I don't think Buddy Hield lasts the season there. I don't think Harrison Barnes lasts the season there either. Holmes is another guy that somebody may want to, like, let's say Portland gets off to a slow start and they're starting to go into panic mode now because Damian Lillard isn't going to stick around if they don't do well in the playoffs, and you got a new coach there and all those other variables. And would I put it past Portland to move Yusuf Nurkic for like Rashawn Holmes and maybe another piece from Sacramento? just to try to shuffle the deck and desperately get a spark there? No, absolutely not. So I think there's guys on Sacramento who are going to get plucked away to better teams and probably do better in those scenarios. And Sacramento is a classic. Now they've gotten just good enough to be in the dreaded no man's land of the NBA. And what are you going to do? Blow it up and start all over again for the 700th time? Like, that's maybe where you're going to be at in this division right now. I mean, some of these teams are old and maybe not sustainable, but Phoenix long-term isn't going anywhere.
Well, let me ask you this. Okay, so I sort of said that it sounded like they were picking the best player on their board available at the time when they were picking Davion Mitchell. Here was still a couple of guys who were still on the board. You just tell me if you think they would have been sort of a better fit. Zaire Williams, the forward out of Stanford, was the next pick. James Bouknight, the shooting guard, was still on the board. Josh Primo, another shooting guard. Chris Duarte was there. He went to Indiana. Corey Kispert, another small forward, was there from Gonzaga. Maybe a Jalen Johnson at a Duke, another shooting forward or small forward, I should say. Do you see those as more? But I don't mean individually, but like, would you have?
I would have gone the forward route. When you're picking at 7 or 8, typically you still want the best player available, but Sacramento at this point needs to make the play-in tournament at the very least. They got to continue some forward momentum, or you're going to get to that point where De'Aaron Fox
draft for your roster, not to just have dudes.
I think so, especially because yes, Buddy Hield has been adamant that he wants to be a starter at this point, but Tyrese Halliburton has been good enough to be a starter. So now you're playing Buddy Hield out of position as an undersized, not defensive-oriented small forward. You've got Harrison Barnes playing small ball power forward, where Barnes, again, is a very solid player. Is Barnes really a starting caliber player in the NBA? I don't think so. And I think it's fine here because he is probably their 5th best player, 4th best player. And that's where he should slot in if he's going to be a starter. But I, again, would have taken a young guy. We don't know if Marvin Bagley is going to amount to anything. I think this is his last shot with Sacramento, and then he'll get a couple of other looks elsewhere. But the dude can't stay healthy, and there's been attitude issues there as well, because that's what happens in Sacramento when guys come in and there's no structure and they languish. And we've seen this over and over and over again with the Kings and draft picks that flame out. Even DeMarcus Cousins played well, put up the numbers, but was as dysfunctional as could be. And it was both his own doing and a product of his environment, all feeding off of one another. And we're seeing like a mini version of that here with Marvin Bagley too. So there's no way to get excited about this team. Okay. And I just want to move on. Like, let's just be done. I can't talk about the Kings anymore. I'm sorry, Kings fans. We love you guys. We love the building. We love the atmosphere. You guys still show up and cheer on the team. Like, it's great. But man, the teams ahead of you are just better.
I think you gave them a lot, considering they didn't give you a lot, right? I think you gave more to them than they gave to their fans, to be honest with you. So
I gave them a middling review, just like they will be. So
listen, nothing wrong with Davion Mitchell. Just maybe not now, right? Maybe just say it would have been nice to have him. We don't have a spot for him, so. Okay, so it's time to pick the division, as we do each of one of these previews. Joel, I guess you'll nut up first, since you considered that you are already telling us your division winner in this. So, Joel,
here we go with those phallic references again, Arky Shea.
No, I was talking about like peanuts, Brazilian nuts, nuts and bolts in your toolbox.
Number 1 in the Pacific Division.
Testicles.
Yes, I'm picking the Golden State Warriors for all the reasons that I said before. I'll take the Lakers second. I think the Lakers get off to a little bit of a slow start that freaks everybody out for the first 10 days. And of course, they're going to be all over ESPN and all of the sports websites and networks, and the talking heads will go crazy, but they will go on a very nice run and probably be in the lead for a little bit. But I don't believe it's sustainable. I do think we see a late season stagnation like we did last year. So I'm taking them second. I think the Phoenix Suns, with all of their youth and the upside that's there, will have a tougher season than last year because they're not sneaking up on anybody at this point, but they still are very good. So I'll take them third. I don't believe Kawhi Leonard gets back in time. And while I think you've got all those X factors and good things can happen, remember, I said the Clippers, if everything breaks right, can be a quasi-title contender. Yet I'm still going to put them in fourth, though I do think they make the playoffs. And then Kings in fifth. And it'll be a miracle. Kings fans should be out in the street rejoicing if Sacramento can make the play-in tournament. I don't think it's impossible for them. I don't think it's impossible because, again, I don't hate the roster. I just don't think it's likely given how good the rest of the Western Conference is. I'm not taking Sacramento even ahead of somebody like Minnesota, who was way worse than them last year.
I'm rooting for it because I would like to see this entire division in the playoffs. Like, I would like to see all 5 teams make half the playoff spots and just say, hey, Northwest Division, I know it's tough up there. Y'all get one this year. That's what's going to happen, although that would be kind of surprising. We'll talk about them at some point. I'm with you on the Warriors. I think the Warriors are as close to a 2021 picture-perfect starting roster and starting 5 that you're going to be able to get in this NBA, right? Like, I think they have sort of pushed the NBA to this direction, so they've become the team to do this for, and I still think that they're the standard bearer, and I think they've gotten better. I think they've gotten better. Again, it's all health. It's all health. It's literally just all health as far as this point, but I think they're number 1. Number 2, I don't think the Phoenix Suns dropped nearly that far. Right. I do think that they come back to earth a little bit. I mean, winning 71% of their games was a lot, and they'll have to win a whole bunch of games again to get up there and be competing for the number 2 spot in this division again. But this division is going to have a ton of wins throughout it. Like, poor Sacramento may actually go down to like 25 wins. Like, the wins have got to come from somewhere, right? And they just got to. So I think it's Warriors 1, Suns 2, Lakers 3, Clippers 4, and sadly, I actually think Sacramento regresses win-wise just because they just have to come from somewhere, right? Like, if this is going to be such a stacked division again, like we think, I don't think there's a lot of room for Sacramento to be able to get better.
Especially if they get fire sailed at the trade deadline, right? Which is entirely possible to happen with Hield and Barnes and maybe even Holmes, like we talked about. Tristan Thompson is another one.
Oh, yeah. Tristan Thompson's a prime candidate. Absolutely. I mean, hey, I've been here for 2 months. I'm gone. Cool. All right. That's great. So, all right. Well, Joel, I am right as always on this. So congratulations. Everyone can make their bets already. And Joel, you can tell us where people can find this video feed of us because they want to see the discussion for this last hour we've had.
Yeah, absolutely. And they wanted to see Arky Shea's face when he realized it was the Andrea Bargnani episode. So if you're listening on the audio version, this is your reason, not only for living, but your reason for heading over to YouTube, checking out the channel, giving us a like, a share, a subscribe, all that good stuff. Sign up for the notifications. Do what you got to do and enjoy physical comedy at its finest. Nonverbal comedy. Just come on over, enjoy it. We appreciate all you listeners. However you get the show, keep listening. Tell a friend about it. We appreciate you guys so much. So this is episode 77. The Andrea Bargnani episode is in the books. And Arky Shea, who we talking about next time? It can only be better for you. It can only go up from here. I think this is the low point of possibly the entire run of shows that we've done together. And it's got to be pushing 100 because during the season we have those BbA bites where it's not even a numbered episode.
A, you're a jerk for bringing up Bargnani yet again, even though you're just capping the episode.
I might just make episode 78 the Andrea Bargnani part 2 episode.
B, can I just say you're a lot meaner to me about my Knicks than I am about you, and your franchise is miserable right now. Miserable.
I've already cried the tears, and like my cold robot heart is already as black as can be on this. Like it's. You can't burn me in any way that the team hasn't burned me already.
Well, next week we'll talk about the division that my Knicks were just 8 games away from winning last year.
Yes, they were.
That is the Atlantic Division. That's your 76ers, Nets, Knicks, Celtics, and Raptors. A whole loaded division again.
It
full of
is.
storylines to talk about and teams as well. And we'll do that in 1 week. Joe, in the meantime, thank you, sir.
Bon voyage, everybody. Have a great week.
That doesn't go to you, Bargnani.